Welcome to the day in history for April 29th. Today, well, I did have a different one planned, but as I was going through it, I realized it was kind of depressing and I didn't want to do it. So we're going to talk about Joan of Arc, which is a really important subject, but I think it's one that we need to talk about in person as a class so that you guys can ask questions and we can have more feedback. If you're interested in some stuff about Joan of Arc, there's some great videos online. Check it out. But I did find one that I think is excellent. And when I say excellent, I mean like amazing and really, really good. So today's day in history is the day that the first edition of Peter Roget's Thesaurus is published. Now, I happen to have an old thesaurus that is Roget's. I think it's amazing, brilliant, just a masterpiece. So we're going to talk about that today. The big idea is that if you use this book correctly, it can be an amazing resource for your writing, for what you're going to explore in words. So now I'm going to let you write this down. Go right ahead. Now, let's talk about synonyms. Now, before we jump into synonyms, we need to talk about where we're at. We're in London, again, in England, the UK. Yeah, I know. I'm going to try and use a lot of synonyms. We'll see. I'm a thesaurus sometimes. It's not a dinosaur. It's a way to compare words. But, you know. Okay, here we go. So we're going to go all the way back to the time of the Phoenicians. We're talking 120 CE, so a long time ago. There was a guy by the name of the Philo of Bilbos who wrote a lot of stuff in Greek. And one of the things that he wrote about were synonyms, which many historians believe was the beginning of the thesaurus. Now, he didn't, the Philo of Bilbos didn't come out and write a thesaurus and name it a thesaurus and say, here's a book of synonyms. But he did talk about using different words to say the same thing, to explain things in multiple ways. So, that's one of the first examples. Now, in about the year 300 CE, in ancient India, written in Sanskrit, was something that looked a little bit closer to a thesaurus. And it was called the Amarakosha. And this is a example of the writing of it. And what it was another comparison of synonyms and how you could describe something in many ways, in many different ways. So, and now this once again is about the 4th century or 300 CE. Pretty interesting. Now, as we jump forward to the 1600s, John Wilkins wrote this, which is an essay towards a real character. Now, this wasn't a thesaurus because, well, it's not the first thesaurus, but it did talk about a universal language, a language that we could share as a world, and it talked about how we can use synonyms and meanings and different words to describe the same thing. It's pretty interesting. Now, there were a couple other examples of thesaurus-like books, but nothing really until we get to today's day in history. So, Roget's Thesaurus, pretty amazing stuff. I really like it. It's brilliant. So let's talk a little bit about Roget himself. Now, boy, I screwed up my slides again. And you know what? I'm not going to start over. That's okay. Let's talk about a synonym first. You guys probably know what synonyms are. A synonym is a word that has a meaning similar to another word. So let's take a look at what we have here. Admit and confess. Alike, same. Assist, help, awful, terrible, begin, start, big, large, buy, purchase, fast, quick, fool, idiot, enjoyment, fun, garbage, trash, gather, collect, present, gift, excellent, good. That's just a small example of synonyms that we use. Now, when we write, and this takes a lot of practice, we often find ourselves reusing the same words. And so a thesaurus is a really good way to find replacements for those words so that our writing is a little more varied, a little more interesting. Now is when I'm going to talk about Roget. Sorry for my slide screw up there. But, you know, when you do, 44 of these, 50 of these, you're going to mess some things up sometimes. So, here we go. Now, Roget was born in 1779. His dad was a clergyman, so he worked for the church. And Roget decided to go study medicine. He wanted to be a doctor. Now, he went to Edinburgh University, and his medical career didn't really go that great. So he eventually ended up being a private tutor for a student and doing some other jobs. He did practice some medicine, but it wasn't as successful as he wanted. Now, something that I found very interesting was that in 1814, he got some recognition for the invention of this slide rule. Now, a slide rule is like an old style calculator, but he invented this that allowed you to find the square root and the powers of numbers. I thought that was pretty cool. So, now, there is some evidence that later in life he started to become very depressed. And one of the ways that he coped or that he dealt with this depression was by making lists and putting things in categories. And to be honest, the thesaurus is a giant categorization of words. It puts words in lists that relate to each other. And I could actually see how that might be fairly comforting, because he went through and found different meanings or words that had similar meanings and put them all together. And it must have been pretty satisfying in the end to have this book that just has thousands and thousands of words at your fingertips that you can use and interchange, and it was a pretty good idea. And so in 1852, he publishes his first edition of Roget's Thesaurus. Now, I happen to have my own copy of Roget's Thesaurus, and as I looked through it, I found very, very old coupons to Taco Time from 1990. I don't think they take them anymore, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the thesaurus. Now, a thesaurus is used when you want to find a different word to say something. Like, you could look up the word cute, and you don't want to say cute because you used it in a sentence before. And so you want to find something else to replace it. You could use beautiful, or dazzling, or boy, what's another good one? Should I look it up? Well, let's see how we actually use a thesaurus. So, first of all, let's make sure that we know the difference between an antonym and a synonym. So an antonym are opposites, like these: light and dark, empty, crowded, popular, unpopular, trusting, suspicious. So when we're talking about synonyms, we want things that mean the same. So Roget, he said, well, let's do this. He put in the back a giant list of all of these words. So for example, I'm going to look up a word. How about the word swell? Now, swell can mean a lot of different things. So let's say I want to find a different word for swell. I'm going to look here, and let's see if I move it up here, if you can actually see this. This might not work, but swell. And swell says to go to page 194.2. Okay, now, do you see how I started in the back, like the index? Now, I'm going to go to 194.2. And so I'm going to go, here's 742, 383, 194.2, right? 194.1, 194.2, swelling, swell, rising, tympany, tumor, tumorification, above, bulge, knoll, dune, billow, surge. I just got a lot of new words I could use. How about the word shrinking? Yes, shrinking. 195.1. 195. And this is actually really quick. 195.1. Contraction, decrease in size, reduction, lessening, curtailment, compaction, condensation, concentration, constriction, shrinking, consumption, emancipation. There are so many different words that you can find to use in here. Now, nowadays, you know what we often do? Thesaurus.com. There's a lot of ways that we can use thesauruses or online thesauruses to make our writing better. Now, I know today's day in history wasn't the most amazing, but you know what? I wanted to have a little bit of fun. So, use a thesaurus in your nano, use a thesaurus in your words of the day, use a thesaurus any chance you get, because as you get older, especially when you go to college, this will come in very handy when you write those 100-page essays. Thanks, guys.